Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Down the Tee Tennis Podcast. We're going to be previewing the Miami Open today, and I'm joined by Kieran Archer. How are you doing, Kieran, and are you looking forward to the Miami Open?
Yeah, of course I am. It's one of the biggest tournaments of the year, so definitely excited for it to get going. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Like you say, it's one of the biggest tournaments of the year, definitely one of the biggest outside of the Grand Slams, and it'll be the first time it's been held since 2019, so we've had a bit of a wait. Obviously, it was cancelled last year, one of the first tournaments to be cancelled due to the pandemic, and so just a bit of information about the Miami Open. It was founded in 1985. It was held at Crandon Park, which was a great venue from 1987 to 2018, until it moved to the Hard Rock Stadium in 2019, as we mentioned. So there's been one edition held there. That's where it's now held. Djokovic and Barty are the defending champions. And Djokovic and Agassi hold the record for the most titles on the men's side with 6, whereas Serena's got the record on the WTA side with 8 titles. And it's, like we say, a big event, an ATP Masters 1000 and WTA 1000, first Masters 1000 of the year. Obviously, Indian Wells was cancelled, so we'll get straight into who's playing the event. On the men's side, there's been 19 withdrawals so far, which is, a huge amount. And the most significant ones are Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, Thiem, Wawrinka, Monfils, all playing out, as well Kyrgios, but we haven't seen him since the Australian Open. So just on those withdrawals, why do you think so many players have pulled out on the men's side? Do you think it's to do with the fact Indian Wells was cancelled, maybe that we don't have the Sunshine Double, and also the significantly reduced prize money this year?
I think it's definitely a mixture of all those factors that you've mentioned. I think definitely the prize money dropping is going to be a factor in kind of a motivation of wanting to play. But, it's still quite a big prize money tournament, so it's still very profitable if for a player if they do well. But then, with Indian Wells getting cancelled as well, it's kind of like flying over to the USA for one tournament and flying back. So that adds to kind of a financial sort of negatives to the tournament as well. So I think just a mix of factors. Obviously, with the COVID adjustments to the ranking system as well, a lot of players aren't really having to defend points or can't really earn many more points, and that may have had an impact on the motivation to play. So I think it's probably just sort of chipping away just a few factors as for each player. It's kind of like, well, I'll make less money. I can't really build any ranking points. So I don't really need to go over this year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, and probably with one or two players, maybe Nadal and Thiem. I think a lot of emphasis being on the clay court season just around the corner could be a reason that, just to travel over to America for one tournament maybe doesn't make sense. And probably those two as well have been having one or two issues physically, so possibly want to be 100% for that. But it has, interestingly, it's a completely different story on the WTA side, because as it stands, all the top 20 are scheduled to play. Like we said, on the ATP, it's 14 of the top 20. So, it's a really strong draw there. So just like moving on to some of the recent events we've had since the Australian Open. Obviously, the last time we had a podcast, there's been some interesting events on the ATP side. The main ones have been in Rotterdam, the ATP 500, the 250 in Doha, and this week we've still got the ATP 500s in Dubai and Acapulco going on. I think as we're recording, Aslan Karatsev's leading the Dubai final against Lloyd Harris, and Stefanos Tsitsipas is going to play Zverev in Acapulco. Rotterdam, Andrei Rublev beat Milan Fucsovics in the final, and Nicolas Basilashvili surprisingly won in Doha against Bautista Agut in the final after he'd been on a long losing streak. So what are your thoughts on those recent tournaments, Kieran? Did you get the chance to catch much of them, and who's impressed you?
It's been a bit of a mix for me. I've caught a lot of kind of Rotterdam and Dubai and Doha, where the broadcast time is kind of spot on for watching in the UK. It's just like throughout the afternoon. Perfect time for me to watch. But the tournament in Acapulco, well, just with poor broadcast time, really, it's been difficult to keep up with those. I did try and stay at one night because I think Musetti was playing, and I am really interested in trying to watch him play. But it just didn't work out for me. I fell asleep before, just as they were about to start the match. On the tournaments, from it's been a really interesting mix of kind of performances of winners. Basilashvili is a bit of an enigma, isn't he? He'll play really well. He'll win titles. I think he's got 5 career titles, which is a lot more than quite a few players at a similar ranking to him, and even higher. But then he'll kind of have a few early exits in a row, and a few tournaments where he performs below his expectations. He never seems to have like an average tournament. Like, that's all right. It's one or the other. I think the Dubai tournament has been really interesting. Karatsev Harris final. Karatsev looks to be in control of that right now, as we're recording. So, I mean, it'd add to that unbelievable story of Karatsev's breakthrough to see him pick up a tournament and an ATP 500 as well, which is one that Dubai especially, it's a 500 that tends to have a really strong draw. A lot of top players travel to. It obviously wasn't the same this year. I think there was still obviously Rublev was there, Bautista Agut was there. I'm probably missing out someone else big that was there. So it wasn't an easy draw. It wasn't a bad draw to come through. It just wasn't at the usual standard of a Dubai draw, but it'd still be an ATP 500 and a good 500 at that. Would be such an unbelievable title for Karatsev to get into his locker.
Oh, it would definitely. And like you, I've watched quite a bit of the tournament in Dubai. I've been extremely impressed by Karatsev. Obviously, he had a decent run as well in Doha last week. I think won a match and pushed Dominic Thiem. But yeah, I mean, to watch the last couple of wins he's had this week in Dubai, beating Yannick Sinner and Rublev in the semi-finals. I mean, he was outstanding. Had to overcome a bit of nerves in the end, but he got over the line, and just the ball striking, the weapons he possesses. I think he's already going to be in the top 30 if he wins the title. I mean, and even in this the current ranking system where it is a lot harder to move up the rankings, the way he's playing at the moment, it's hard not to see him being in the top 20. But at some point this year, possibly even pushing towards the top 10. He's been that impressive, and yeah, it's a really interesting final in Dubai. Or is it Karatsev's playing as a wild card because his ranking was below the required number for Henry at the time of Henry, and Lloyd Harris, who's playing in the finals, a qualifier. He's won, I think, 7 matches to get to that stage. I definitely didn't see Lloyd Harris's run coming. I mean, I thought he was a talented player, but he's definitely got a very big game, big serve, big forehand, and he's enjoying the fast conditions. I think in Dubai, he had a great win against Thiem, I think, early on, and against Shapovalov in the semi-finals. So yeah, a couple of surprise finalists, maybe not as much in Karatsev's case, but that's definitely been interesting. And yeah, like you said on Basilashvili before, it was really hard to predict when his form's going to arrive, especially because I think he lost, I think, 14 of his last 16 matches heading into the tournament, and 5 first-round losses in a row. So I mean, it is unbelievable. Obviously, we saw the comeback of Roger Federer playing his first tournament since the 2020 Australian Open after having 2 knee surgeries last year. He had a match point against Basilashvili in the quarterfinals, but looked really good in his first match against Dan Evans. So it's obviously great to see Federer back. He's pulled out of Dubai, but we're probably going to see him preparing for the clay court season, where he's really going to use his preparation for the grass court season and the Olympics. And yeah, they've been the tournaments I've caught the most of. I've been following a bit of Acapulco, but like you, not seen much due to the time it's been on, but really impressive to see Musetti's run there. And Rublev obviously has continued his fantastic form from last year. So just moving on to the main WTA tournaments that have been since the Australian Open in Adelaide. Iga Swiatek defeated Belinda Bencic in the final of a 500 event there, which was an impressive result for Swiatek. You had Pera Kvitova beating Gabby Muguruza in the final of Doha, and then Muguruza reaching the final again the week later in Dubai, but winning the title against Barbara Krejcikova. I mean, Muguruza has been in outstanding form, probably along with Naomi Osaka, the most impressive player this year. Have you got any thoughts on how well Muguruza's started the year? I know you predicted her to win a Grand Slam this year.
Yeah, obviously slam winners are hard to predict, especially with the WTA, but I'm still quite happy with that prediction, especially since it's Wimbledon that I've predicted for her, because she's won it before, she's been in the final as well, so a 2-time finalist. She's also had a couple of first round exits, but I think she's due another big run there, because that's how it tends to go for her. So I mean, she lost the match of the tournament at the Australian Open against the eventual champions. So there's been nothing so far this season to make me back out of that prediction, other than maybe Osaka's form, because if she managed to string that together on clay and grass, then she'll be one of the favourites for every tournament. But because we haven't seen evidence of that yet, but we have seen evidence of Muguruza winning on grass before, I'm still happy to predict Muguruza for Wimbledon. And both of those players I've mentioned, I'd say they're probably well within the contenders for, a lot of the tournaments coming up. Osaka's obviously probably one of the favourites heading into Miami, but there's a really strong draw there, so anything could happen, as often is the case with the WTA.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll move on to the contenders for the Miami title now. We can start with the women's contenders. We've just been talking about the women's events. As you mentioned, Osaka and Muguruza as probably the main contenders you see for the title. I would agree with you. I mean, I've tried to sort of narrow down a list of players who you could consider a contender for the title. And I mean, I've got quite a list down that I would agree that Osaka maybe a slight favourite, then I'd have Muguruza closely behind. But you've also got Ash Barty in the draw, playing in her first tournament since the Australian Open, like Osaka, and Simona Halep. You'd probably have in that next category down of contenders with Barty, Serena Williams as well, playing her first tournament since the Australian Open. But I mean, there's other players as well, like Sabalenka, who's been in great form, Kvitova, who's won a title, Swiatek as well. I mean, there's a long list, and then you've got Jennifer Brady, who hasn't played since reaching the Australian Open final, Victoria Azarenka, and even Sofia Kenin, who's coming back from a surgery in the draw, Elena Svitolina, Bianca Andreescu. Those you'd probably say are less likely, but still highly ranked players who have won titles of this size or bigger. And Pliskova, who's made a post of the yes. I mean, you just look through that list. I mean, I think there's 13 players there. There's a lot of players who could win the title, but how do you see the chances of those outside of the likes of Osaka and Muguruza?
For me, I'd maybe. I kind of feel like Serena's got a good chance. I mean, her run in Australia was great, and would she have to play one fewer round in Miami to win it, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like she's definitely got a chance. Back in her home country, she played really well in Australia until just that final hurdle where Osaka turned out to be too much for her. I think Serena would actually have a great chance in Miami, but I mean, it's like you said, you're looking at the draw at the entry list, and there's maybe 10 players at least that you'd give a good chance of winning the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think I agree with you on Serena. I mean, as we mentioned before, that she's won the most titles of a woman in Miami with 8. So, I mean, she clearly enjoys playing there. Okay, all came at the previous venue, but clearly likes playing in Miami. I don't think the conditions are too different. The new event, pretty quick conditions, so I think she'll enjoy that. And yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it's probably Osaka, Muguruza, Serena, and then maybe I'd have Barty, Halep in that category as well. But if I if I had to pick, I would probably just go with Muguruza right now on form. If to pick someone to win the title, if you had to pick, who would you go with for the women's title?
It's going to be really boring if I agree with you, but yeah, she has looked outstanding. You know, obviously a final and a semi-final in the last few weeks. So I think I'm going to agree with you and make Muguruza my favourite.
Yeah, definitely. She has just been outstanding this year. I mean, a title, 2 finals. So moving on to the men's contenders, I think even though, as we're mentioning, there's a lot of big names and top players missing from the draw, I would say there's probably less contenders for the men's title. I mean, the way I sort of see it is Medvedev as a slight favorite. Then I've kind of got Stefanos Tsitsipas, Alexander Zverev, and Alexander Rublev slightly behind, I would say, in the next category of strong contenders. They're the 4 I would sort of see as the main players I would expect to win it. I'd probably be signing with Medvedev at the moment. Obviously, didn't mention before, he won the title in Marseille a couple of weeks ago in ATP 250 after he'd lost early in Rotterdam. But I mean, obviously, Tsitsipas has been in good form. Obviously, got to play in the Acapulco final just before he's heading in. Whether that'll have an effect on him or not, I'm not sure. But Zverev as well, obviously, in that final, and Rublev's been in outstanding form. But it could be a big tournament for Rublev. He's obviously only made one Masters 1000 quarterfinal. So, I mean, is this type of event maybe it's time he would like to make a real breakthrough, and there's an opportunity to do that without Djokovic, Nadal, team in the draw. How do you assess those main contenders? Do you think there's any more outside that group who you'd put in there?
You know what? I'm going to give Shapo a chance. You know, I know he's got a bit of a problem with stumbling at the semi-final, and I think he's lost 10 out of 11 semi-finals that he's been in. Although he's made 2 finals because he got a walkover once. But I think if he goes far, it'd be a great place to just get over that hurdle, put that behind him. But that's kind of just my outside pick. I'd probably still back Medvedev for most, just because he's out of the guys playing. I feel like he's the one who's I think Tsitsipas, Zverev, you know, similar ability level, but Medvedev just seems to cope with pressure and expectation that little bit better. And obviously, like Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, these are not the senior players, but kind of like the players with expectation on them at this tournament. So I feel like Medvedev's probably the best out of those, but Tsitsipas, I think he's got a bit of a title monkey on his back, hasn't he? It's been quite a while for him since his last one. So, but he could win Acapulco, and I think if he does get that monkey off his back, then he's as much of a contender. But if he comes up against Medvedev, obviously Medvedev's massively led the head-to-head recently. And like you say, Rublev, it's probably about time that he stepped up from winning 250s and 500s. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He's shown sort of brilliant mentality, excellent tennis to do that so often. But it does feel like a good tournament for him to like finally go the distance in something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it was what I probably forgot to mention is obviously he didn't get the chance to play as many Masters 1000 events last year when he was having such a fantastic year. But yeah, I would agree with what you said. I mean, whoever wins the Acapulco title out of Tsitsipas and Zverev could be heading in with some great momentum. I mean, obviously Tsitsipas yet to win a Masters 1000 tournament. He's been in 2 finals, or Medvedev and Zverev have both won 3 Masters 1000s. 2 of Zverev's were on clay, though. All of Medvedev's are on hard court. So yeah, I can't look past Medvedev at the moment, and even with, as I mentioned, the brilliant form Rublev's been in, like you said about Tsitsipas's record against Medvedev, I'm expecting Medvedev to go deep in the tournament. He'll probably like the fast conditions, I would expect. So if that's the case, again, Rublev's got an even worse record against Medvedev, never winning a set. So I probably couldn't pick him to win the title because of that. And Medvedev looking back on track again after Marseille. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting dynamic with those four younger players as the main contenders, obviously with Djokovic, Nadal, Team, Federer out of the picture. And like I think Shapovalov, I think he made the semi-finals in Miami a couple of years ago. And it was at the new stadium, so he obviously likes playing there. Bit of a disappointment from to lose to Harris in Dubai, but still a good run for him. He was playing some great tennis, and the semi-final record's definitely a concern, but I'll definitely have him in the next group down of players, probably along with Bautista Agut. You've got Berrettini and Schwartzman in the draw. I'll be a bit surprised to see one of those two win the title, but could maybe have a deep run. And also just note down the likes of Grigor Dimitrov, who's won a Masters 1000, Goffin, Raonic, Hashinov, Sinner, who's again had a great tournament in Dubai, and Karatsev obviously probably couldn't be ruled out to have a good run the way he's playing. So I mean, there's a lot of players, but I would probably be surprised to see any of those guys we mentioned win the title. So but speaking of sort of outside players, just to move on to finish with the wild cards on the ATP side, there's been some really interesting players given wild cards. Obviously, a lag of champions in the draw, but there is one in the form of Andy Murray, who's twice won in Miami, given a wild card. Obviously, was last saw him in Rotterdam, had a good win in the first round, and played a good match against Rublev. So are you pleased to see Murray back at the Miami Open, and what are you expecting from him?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on this one because I've seen a little bit of criticism for the amount of wildcards Andy Murray's getting. But, I mean, a guy who at one point made the big three, the big four, like he was the one that was closest to them, pushing them in semi-finals with them, finals with them. A guy who's won 3 Grand Slam titles, the ATP finals, 2 Olympic gold medals. He's a big person to have at tournaments. And it's still, like you say, opportunities taken away from younger players. But if a younger player draws Andy Murray, what a brilliant experience that is for him. I think Andy Murray is a kind of player that should be getting wild cards. And I think his performances recently have justified him being there. He's not just there to lose in the first round. He pushed Rublev all the way in that first set, but I think run out of steam a little bit after losing the first set disappointingly, after being in it for so long. And considering the mental stumbling block, a lot of the next gen seem to have when playing the big three, maybe playing the fourth member. I mean, Zverev recently lost to Murray. I knew Murray was probably further back in terms of his recovery during that match. So, I'm saying outside chance for the tournament, Andy Murray. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
It's good to see Jack Draper there from a British tennis point of view. I can understand a bit of I've seen that wild card criticised as well, and he's quite far back in the rankings, and there's other players around his age group, that are similarly very talented and could break through, that had to miss out on a wild card. But I don't think you can ever criticise giving a wild card to a young player, a junior Grand Slam finalist. I'm very interested to see how he plays in ATP tour level main draw tennis. I will be taking note of that match time, and if it's on at a reasonable time for me to watch, I'll definitely be watching. Alcaraz, I think that wild card goes without saying. I think the boy deserves wild cards. He's proved that he can mix it with these guys. Hugo Gaston, once again, that I've seen no criticism of that wild card, and I have to agree. So he looks like an interesting player. I'm yet to actually watch him fully outside of highlights, but it's something that I'd like to do. Momoa, a relatively young talent from the USA, you can definitely understand that wild card.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely agree with a lot of what you've said there, and I think you definitely can accuse the tournament of being kind of biased with wild cards towards American players, because obviously Michael Mmoh is the only young American to get a wild card, and I think he deserves one. I think you saw him; he had a good result at the Australian Open. But yeah, as you mentioned, I don't think any tournament can be criticised for giving Andy Murray a wild card, especially one where he's a 2-time champion. But yeah, his recent results and performances have definitely justified it. It's not as if he's he's been playing poorly and can't win a match. So I mean, I think that's, I don't understand the criticism there. And with Draper, I'm very glad to see him in the draw. I think he deserves the opportunity. I mean, he's had some great results at the Challenger and Futures level, particularly the Futures level. But again, we've seen players like that given wild cards in these tournaments before who've been of a similar ranking, like Mikhail Ymer, I think a couple of years ago in Miami was fairly lowly ranked, and it's happened with a few players. As you mentioned, Alcaraz is, he's got to be in the draw. I mean, we saw him play a decent match against Zverev in Acapulco, and I mean, in many people's eyes, one of the brightest young talents. And Hugo Gaston obviously had a fantastic run at the French Open, so I think it's a really interesting group of wildcards on the men's side, definitely. So, and that pretty much brings us to the end. But I'm very much looking forward to the tournament. I think it's great to have the Miami Open back, and we'll be back with a review of the tournament probably. So thank you very much for watching. We hope you've enjoyed. The podcast is now available on a number of podcast platforms as well as YouTube. So that'll be in the description below on YouTube or on the Down the Tee Tennis Podcast Twitter account to check out. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.